Tennessee football fans are no strangers to heartbreaking losses, but this one is going to sting for a long time. Welcome into Off the Hook Sports. I am your host, Caleb Calhoun. The Tennessee Vols fall at home to the Georgia Bulldogs 44-41 in overtime after it seemed like they had the game won in regulation. We're going to talk about everything, our torchbearers, our takeaways from the game, our blame pie because of a loss, the turning points and key moments, and our report card. We're going to give all of you guys that in this moment. Hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn on your notifications, tell a friend. We are building something great here at Off the Hook Sports. Want you to be a part of it. This was a brutal one. I don't think the Vols have suffered a heartbreaking loss like this under Josh Heupel since he's been at Tennessee. They have suffered close losses. You know, you lose the Music City Bowl to Purdue, though, in his first year. You don't really care that much. When you lose like this to Georgia, a game you could have when you believe you're a college football playoff team and you have a tough road to get to the college football playoffs, and it's a grind if you don't win this game, that one hurts. I got to put this like in the echelon with some of those Florida losses in the mid-2010s. And by the way, we're going to have to put some of that on Josh Heupel. And I had that written before it was confirmed that Tennessee was going to lose this game. Because to tell you the truth, Josh Heupel made some mistakes in this game. There was a lot of blame to go around, as there is in any loss. There were a lot of things to give credit to at the same time. I think what really hurts a lot of Vol fans in this one is the loss really wasted the chance at one of the best underdog stories in college football. Joey Aguilar, I know he threw 2 interceptions. I know he made a couple of mistakes. I know he wasn't the most accurate, but he played his heart out in this game. Joey Aguilar, a guy who was a walk-on to a junior college school just 4 years ago, then went to Appalachian State, had never started for an FBS program or for a Division I, for a Power 4 program until this year, goes to UCLA, is ditched by UCLA for former Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava, and in a trade-off finds himself at Tennessee, does everything in his power to help Tennessee win this game. And not just him, a lot of guys did their part. The receivers played their hearts out. It was your entertaining game. I thought this thing was going to end like the Alabama game. I texted a couple of people. I said, this feels like the 2022 Alabama game, which Tennessee went off a game-winning field goal. And it comes down to a game-winning field goal, and they lose. They hook it wide right, which sends it to overtime where Georgia scores off a touchdown by Josh McRae on a second effort, which was the right call. He did reach the end zone. I kind of knew once it got to overtime that Tennessee was going to lose, just so you guys know, because Tennessee, if you really watch their defensive line towards the end of that game, they were just tired, man. They were just tired. Georgia is still better across the board. They're better across the field. We knew that going in. I think every Tennessee fan would have acknowledged that at their hearts, that Georgia has better talent. And for most of the game, Tennessee actually looked like the better team and played better. But Georgia's got more depth, and they've got more talent. And if you let them hang around, Kirby Smart has shown this time and time and time again since he's been the head coach at Georgia in dating back to 2016. If you let him hang around, he will find a way to make his team win the game in the end. Kirby Smart is one of the best in-game, close-game coaches in college football history. He does have talent, and he overwhelms you with it. But he also just knows how to win and knows how to make the right decisions and knows how to coach with the flow of the game as it goes on. That happened here, and you let him hang around, and you knew Georgia had better talent than you, and because of that, this is what happened. It was a complete heartbreak for Tennessee. The Tennessee football losing streak to Georgia is now at 9 games. Interesting little fact. That ties the record for the longest winning streak in the series by either team, which was set by Tennessee when they won 9 straight from 1989 to 1999. Now, you wonder why is it only 9 from 89 to 99? Tennessee and Georgia played in 89. They did not play in 90 and 91, but then the divisional split happened in 92, and Tennessee beat them every year from 1992 to 1999. The Vols will still have to wait to get another win on Georgia, since that Hail Mary from Josh Dobbs to Jawan Jennings in 2016. It hasn't happened yet. It was a tough one to swallow. There is no doubt about it. Because I understand how you would feel that Tennessee should have had this game. And look, I've talked about this before. I think one of the reasons it hurts the most, and we're going to get into this, it's really not like Tennessee was outmatched by Georgia for most of the game, and then a couple of fluke plays kept them in it. That wasn't the case at all. In many ways, at different points, Tennessee looked like the better team. They're not. Georgia has more talent, but they looked like the better team, and that was a big deal, and that does stand out. So hit the like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn on your notifications. We are going to get to our takeaways from the Tennessee football loss to Georgia. We're going to go ahead and get rolling on that right now. And when you do takeaways, depending on a win or a loss, depends on whether or not you weigh the negatives or the positives. And so we're going to weigh the negatives first. And the biggest takeaway that I think we have to point out is Gunnar Stockton torched Tennessee secondary. Gunnar Stockton, we had questions on him going into the game. I myself had major questions about Gunnar Stockton going into the game, and I was very big on that. He had not started an SEC road game. He had not started a road game in college football, and he had looked very mediocre up until this point. Georgia turned him loose. His mobility was a clear factor in this game. He had 13 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. No one saw that mobility coming. He had shown it in the past, but not to that level. But he was also 23 of 31 for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Gunnar Stockton played superb. He was clutch. He didn't panic when the moment hit. He obviously converted that 4th and 6 touchdown pass late to Landon Humphreys, which I forgot to mention was another key play in the game. We're going to get to that, but he converts the 4th and 6 late. He converted multiple 4th downs in this game, and that be the difference. Gunnar Stockton was very clutch on 4th down, showed a lot of moxie. You have to give him a lot of credit. He is a baller. He is a good quarterback. On the other side, Tennessee secondary was just abysmal. Now, again, a lot of this is Gunnar Stockton. He made amazing throws, and Tennessee was playing without its top 2 cornerbacks, Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III being out. Turned out to be a big deal. I didn't think it would be, but I didn't think Gunnar Stockton could play like that, and he could. And Tennessee was starting a freshman in Ty Redmond. They were starting Colorado transfer Colton Hood, and they picked up so many pass interference penalties in this game. And it wasn't, they didn't pick them up because they were getting beat. They picked them up because they were just honestly, a lot of times making contact where they didn't need to make contact. And that was a big issue. So the big takeaway is Gunnar Stockton torched Tennessee secondary. And a lot of that had to do with Tennessee secondary making huge, crucial mistakes and committing unnecessary pass interference penalties. There was a clear one on a 3rd down in the first half where Andre Turnstein made contact with the receiver when the ball was sailing out of bounds. It was a catchable enough ball that he would not have caught, by the way. He wouldn't have caught it, but the pass interference rule is it has to be catchable, not whether or not you think there was a greater than 50% chance the receiver was going to catch it. And it was a theoretically catchable ball. Andre Turnstein, for no reason whatsoever, made contact with the guy, and that resulted in a pass interference penalty. That was part of the issues all night for Tennessee. And so, again, at the end of the day, the big deal, Tennessee made the pass defense was torched way too much. And part of that comes into our next point, which is we're talking about pass interference penalties. Vols made far too many mistakes. I said going into this game that Tennessee would beat Georgia, and I told you guys I predicted Tennessee to beat Georgia. I said Tennessee would beat Georgia largely because, and I stood on this, Tennessee would win the game because Georgia with Gunnar Stockton did not seem to be gelling, and they were going to make a lot of mistakes. If I had known that Tennessee was going to make the mistakes, I wouldn't have even thought they would have been in this game, honestly. But they made the mistakes. Georgia had 5 penalties for 39 yards. Tennessee had 10 penalties for 82 yards. You cannot have 10 penalties for 82 yards when the other team has 5 penalties for 39 yards, and that other team is better, and you're at home. You can't do that. I just talked about those crucial pass interference penalties. Well, also, Tennessee had 2 interceptions in the game, 2 turnovers. Now, that's part of Joey Aguilar's moxie, but it is a problem when you only force 1 turnover on Georgia. And they did only force 1 turnover on Georgia. And now, technically, Georgia had 2 turnovers, but one of them was a last-second desperation pass at the end of the first half that counts as a turnover. I don't really think that should count as a turnover. So when you take those things into account, Tennessee, in general, committed more mistakes, and they couldn't afford to do that. And it wasn't just the pass interference penalties. It wasn't just the turnovers. It was also the timing of the penalties. Guys, what happened at the end of the game? Late in the fourth quarter, Tennessee up 35-30. They strip sack Gunnar Stockton. They have the ball. They could punch it in for a score, but there is a false start by Sam Pendleton. Pushes him back. Josh Heupel runs it 3 times just to settle for the field goal. To the very next series when Tennessee's driving for the game-winning field goal, It was going to be a 37-yard field goal, and Shamron Uvarab commits a false start. Tennessee has to settle for a 42-yard field goal. We're going to get to some of those, but you cannot have those type of mistakes when you're playing Georgia, and you certainly shouldn't have them on offense when you're playing at home. That is a huge no-no, big mistake. So, again, I can't believe I'm saying this. I really thought Tennessee was going to win this game off Georgia mistakes. They actually made more mistakes in this game, which is crazy that they even hung around given the talent gap between the two schools. Now, another big takeaway, and this is a big one. I'm going to give it a couple of positives. Passing game was on point again. Joey Aguilar, you got to love the guy. Chris Brazel, pass protection. Every part of the passing game was on point, by the way. Lance Hurd and Jesse Perry at the tackle spots did their jobs protecting Joey Aguilar. Chris Brazel balled out. Braylon Staley balled out. Mike Matthews did what he was supposed to do to stretch the field. Miles Goodson was involved. 3 catches for 33 yards. Joey Aguilar in the passing game as a whole, 371 yards and 4 touchdowns. Yes, there were the 2 picks. We've talked about that. But in general, the passing game is rolling. It's the best passing attack Tennessee's had since Hendon Hooker. You have to love what this passing attack represents. Joey Aguilar did an incredible job in this game, and Tennessee has to be very happy about him. I think that's, again, why this loss hurts so much for Tennessee football fans. But here's the other positive for Tennessee that I didn't see coming. Look, until the overtime, which I noticed, and I think you did too, there's no way around this. The Vols won the line of scrimmage. The Vols absolutely won the line of scrimmage. They had 6 tackles for a loss to Georgia's 2. They had 3 sacks to Georgia's 1. That doesn't even include the strip sack that Joshua Josephs got, okay? Which is a huge part of this game. They were dominating when it came to the pressure up front. But beyond dominating with the pressure up front, Georgia had 3.6 yards per carry, and Tennessee had 3.7 yards per carry. That's skewed a little bit because Georgia's got a mobile quarterback in Gunnar Stockton. Tennessee's got a drop-back passer in Joey Aguilar. Strip those out, and you're talking something completely different. And Tennessee's average is over 4 yards a carry. Tennessee was better on the ground game. The Vols won the line of scrimmage. I said going into this, Tennessee has not yet been tested with its interior offensive line. They have 4 new starters on the offensive line. Lance Hurd back at left tackle. Well, Tennessee has been tested now. And I will say this up front for a very good positive going forward out of this game. You can rest easy, Tennessee fans. The offensive line will be fine. It has not taken a step back from last year with Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins, and Andre Carrick all gone. And, of course, it could even get better when David Sanders Jr. gets out there. I think Tennessee fans, you guys should be very encouraged by what you saw from the offensive line in this game. Now, the mental errors, I just talked about them. The mistakes, the false start penalties, big problem. You got to fix those. You can correct those. What you saw, though, was against a Georgia Bulldogs defensive front. This offensive line held its own. That is the first time a Tennessee offensive line has held its own against a Georgia Bulldogs defensive front ever under the Josh Heupel era. Most notably, on the other side, the Tennessee football defensive line was better than the Georgia defensive line. It just was. And Bryson Eason played his heart out in the middle. Tyree West, Tyree Weathersby, all of these guys did everything they could. And then on the edge rushers, Caleb Herring, Joshua Josephs, and Jordan Ross. I mean, everybody up front played incredible. You got to give them credit. However, the biggest takeaway that we just can't ignore, and we have to talk about it, Josh Heupel made way too many basic in-game mistakes in this one, guys. I mean, way too many. And I'm going to go down the list of them because they were bad ones. And just so you know up front, he's going to make my football IQ segment on Tuesday unless some other guys are just absolutely atrocious at what they do. Because what did Josh Heupel do in the second quarter? You're in a shootout. You are in a shootout, okay? When you're in a you guys know how I feel about punting. When you're in a shootout, you don't punt the ball near midfield on 4th and short. However, after Tennessee got the ball near midfield, brought up a 4th and 2 at the 49-yard line, Josh Heupel called a punt. That was with about 7:57 left in the first half. Tennessee was up 21-14. Critical mistake. You don't do that. You don't do that. Punting is bad in general. I'm not a fan of it. I have data and win probabilities and analytics and metrics to prove to you that, but you certainly don't do it in a high-scoring game when it's 4th and 2 from the 50 and you've only been stopped once to that point. You can't do that. You know Georgia's going to get back in the game. You got to keep your foot on the gas, but that's not the only mistake Josh Heupel made. Late in the fourth quarter, again, when he settled for the field goal, that came after a false start penalty where it was 1st and 15. Tennessee was up 35-30. They had the ball on the Georgia 39-yard line. Josh Heupel just ran it 3 times to set up a 48-yard field goal by Max Gilbert. Now, he hit it, but it's already dangerous to set up a 48-yard field goal. Most notably, that keeps it a 1-score game. You're facing Kirby Smart. You're facing Georgia, the best close game team in college football the last 5 years. This isn't the Alabama teams of Nick Saban, which actually weren't as good in the clutch. They just overwhelmed you so much talent-wise. Kirby Smart's been incredible in close games. You don't give him a chance to come back, and that was a critical mistake by Josh Heupel. You don't sit on the lead. He had scored 2 touchdowns on the previous 2 drives. By throwing the ball and being aggressive. You don't settle for a field goal to go up 38-30, giving Kirby Smart and Georgia a chance to tie it up. You can't do that. And then at the end of the game, what did he do? He tried to get cute. He tried to get cute with his timeouts and when he was running a play to the left side, and that ended up resulting in a false start and a 43-yard field goal from the left hash mark, which is why the kick sailed wide right or wide left, depending on the angle of you looking at it. Okay, the kick sailed wide, and that's how the game-winning field goal was missed. You cannot make those mistakes. Josh Heupel trying to get cute. There is no way around this. Josh Heupel trying to get cute costs Tennessee. Him being way too careful and then trying to get cute at the end absolutely costs Tennessee. There is no way around that fact. Those are the 5 takeaways. Hit that like and subscribe button again. Ring the bell, turn on your notifications. Tell a friend. Building something great here at Off the Hook Sports. Want you to be a part of it. We now move on with the turning points in the game. The turning points and key moments for Tennessee football in their 44-41 loss to Georgia in overtime. I just want to say up front, none of them came in overtime. None of them. Josh McRae's 1-yard run for a touchdown that was reviewed. That's not a turning point. The 21-yard run by Nate Frazier to set up the touchdown. Not a turning point. The game was over in overtime. The game was over by the time it went to overtime. Tennessee didn't have the horses left to hang. Here's where the real turning points were. It actually started in the first quarter. Tennessee had built a 21-7 lead, and they were looking like they could start to control the game. They brought up a 3rd and 12 after Caleb Herring got a key sack on Gunnar Stockton. It was 3rd and 12, Georgia ball from their own 39-yard line. Tennessee is up 21-7, and you think they're going to get the ball back. Gunnar Stockton completes a pass to Cash Jones for 9 yards to the Georgia 48. Kirby Smart, unlike Josh Heupel, decides to go for it near midfield. Gunnar Stockton completes a pass to Zachariah Branch for 13 yards to the Tennessee 39 for a first down. That 3rd and 12 9-yard conversion and turning into a 4th and 3 conversion to get a first down, that sets up a Georgia touchdown, puts them back in the game. A huge turning point. Kirby Smart's aggression is to be commended. Kirby Smart had already gotten stopped on downs on the previous drive, by the way, when he went for it on 4th and 3 near the 32-yard line. And to Tennessee's credit, it didn't matter. He goes for it on 4th and 3 and gets stopped. And guess what? He decides to go for it again 2 drives later because that's one drive later because that's who Kirby Smart is. You have to give him credit for that. Huge turning point. Another gigantic turning point in the game. Back-to-back 3rd down defensive pass interference penalties on Georgia's field goal drive late in the first half. This was huge, and I already talked about that. So they were both on 3rd down. Tennessee had brought up a 3rd and 10 from the Georgia 10. Late, or actually it was middle of the second quarter. About 7 minutes left. And Gunnar Stockton throws an incomplete pass. Tennessee picks up a pass interference penalty. They get the first down. Then comes a 3rd and 5. Gunnar Stockton takes a shot. Andre Turntine picks up a completely unnecessary pass interference penalty. That is the right call. A lot of people wanted the pass to be uncatchable. But as I said, it doesn't have to be a greater than 50% chance the receiver would have caught the ball to be uncatchable. They just had to have a snowball's chance in hell of catching the pass. And you're going to call pass interference there. And they had a snowball's chance in hell. But you make them fight for the snowball's chance in hell. You don't give them the first down by getting a pass interference penalty. Tennessee committed that. Back-to-back pass interference penalties on the same drive. Georgia was then able to run down the clock, run down the field, and kick a field goal on 4th and goal from the 2 to make it 21-17. That was utterly crucial in the game because it truly put them right back in it. Sean McNeil, a super chat. Thank you, Sean McNeil. We really appreciate your super chats. Says, I saw enough from Gunner to never believe in him. He's terrible. 304 yards, 2 touchdowns. He saw enough from Gunner to never believe in him. Sean, I don't know. I disagree. Gunner Stockton showed a lot of moxie in this one. Maybe he's not the best, but he was clutch and he came through when it mattered. And that was a big deal. All right, moving on from other turning points. Well, we talked about those two in the first quarter and second quarter, and then things are going back and forth, and Tennessee scoring touchdowns, Georgia scoring field goals. You think Tennessee's got control. Tennessee takes a 35-30 lead, scoring back-to-back touchdowns, responding to 2 Georgia field goals. You think Tennessee's got it. They strip sack. I brought this up. They strip sack Gunner Stockton, and they get the ball. Tennessee has it 1st and 10. They have the ball 1st and 10 on the Georgia 34-yard line, up 35-30 with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Step on their throat. That's what you want to do here. You're ready to step on their throat. Well, Sam Pendleton moves the ball just ever so slightly on a snap. The refs catch it. They call false start. That pushes Tennessee back 5 yards. Heupel decides to settle for the field goal there after 3 straight runs to give Tennessee a 38-30 lead. That false start was huge. The next turning point, well, this one's obvious. It's the play of the game, if you ask me. Gunner Stockton, 4th and 6, 36-yard touchdown pass to London Humphreys. A 28-yard touchdown pass, excuse me. I don't know why I keep saying 36. 28-yard touchdown pass to London Humphreys. It was 4th and 6 at the Tennessee 28-yard line. 2.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and Tennessee's up 38-30. I actually thought Georgia was going to go for the field goal there. They have an automatic kicker, and I thought they were going to go for the field goal. They didn't. They went for the jugular. They went for the tying touchdown. They got it, converting a 4th and 6, and then they tied it up with the 2-point conversion. That was a huge play, a 28-yard touchdown pass, Gunner Stockton to London Humphreys. That tied it up at 38. However, Tennessee still had a chance to fight back, and they drive down the length of the field, and with 3 seconds left in the fourth quarter, excuse me, I take that back. With 7 seconds left in the fourth quarter, it is 3rd and 5 at the Georgia 25 for a dead center field goal. Actually, no, for a field goal off to the left. They're looking at maybe moving to try to get a dead center field goal, and Shamrod Umarov commits the worst false start penalty in the history of false start penalties, and that pushes them back to the Georgia 25. It was on the Georgia 20. It was going to be a 37-yard field goal. All Josh Heupel was trying to do was to get a little bit to the right side to make it a more dead center field goal. And instead, a false start penalty kicked in from Shamrod Umarov, pushed them back. Josh Heupel didn't even try at that point to get it a dead center field goal, which was a huge mistake. You play the odds. You're not going to get another false start penalty, chances are. But he played the odds and went for a field goal from an angle. It was why it was hooked and it was missed, but it comes down to the Shamrod Umarov false start penalty. That false start penalty was a huge turning point in the game. And how many times have you guys watched a game where 2 false start penalties were crucial turning points? Well, they were in this one's. Basically, this came down to 2 completions by Gunner Stockton, 2 false start penalties, and back-to-back third down defensive pass interference penalties. That's the way this thing played out. It was a brutal one for Tennessee because Gunner Stockton, the conversions he made, you can live with. He made some great plays there. Though that particularly that 4th and 6, that was a dime that he dropped. London Humphreys was only where London Humphreys could catch it. You can't even be mad at it. It was just a beautiful throw. But Tennessee committing those pass interference penalties and then the 2 false start penalties, those were deadly. You can't have those in these type of moments. They had those in these type of moments, and that made the difference. That's why they ended up losing this game in overtime. It was brutal. And so taking that into account, the turning points were crucial. The turning points were brutal. And I've never seen them come down to so many penalties, but the turning points were mostly penalties. Now, The blame pie. It's time to do the blame pie for Tennessee football in their 44-41 loss to Georgia. And there's a decent bit of blame to go around in this one. And it's going to start with the pass defense. I mean, there's no way around that. The pass defense gets 50% of the blame. They had way too many pass interference penalties, way more than they should have had. They had allowed Gunnar Stockton, who had not proven himself at all in his first SEC road start, to go 23-31 for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The pass defense, and will just say the back seven, because they also allowed Gunnar Stockton to run it 13 times for 38 yards and another touchdown. Gunnar Stockton torched the back seven. Part of this was him and what he did. But in general, the back seven was a huge problem. There's no way around it. The back seven made critical mistakes when things were on the line. And when you take that into account, yeah, I put a huge portion of the blame on them. They've got to be better. Now, to be fair to the back seven, again, Tennessee was without its top 2 cornerbacks, Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III. Those are the 2 starters. Jermon McCoy has All-American potential. They were starting a freshman and a transfer from Colorado and Colton Hood, who's not bad, but at the same time, not what they needed. Tennessee, still, all in all, there's no way around it. The back seven's got to be better. And when I say the back seven, the linebackers too. There are 2 veteran linebackers on this team in Arian Carter and Jeremiah Thielander. And they're starting to raise some real red flags in how they play in coverage. I mean, we keep seeing once a week Arian Carter has a lapse in coverage. I love Arian Carter as a person, as the way he plays as a leader. He's a really good athlete, but he is still making errors in coverage that he made last year. Coverage linebackers on his strength, that's fine. But at the same time, he's going to have to get better at what he does, particularly containing the quarterback and containing guys like Gunnar Stockton. He did not do that in this game. That turned out to be deadly. It was a big problem. So I'm giving 50% of the blame to the pass defense. I just can't go. I mean, there's just no way around it for me. But I'm giving 35% of the blame to Josh Heupel. I can't give all the blame to Josh Heupel like that because, again, the pass defense, it wasn't just letting Gunnar Stockton run on them and things like that. It was the pass interference penalties, and a couple of them were just unnecessary. 35% of the blame goes to Josh Heupel. I just talked about those mistakes. Josh Heupel made too many critical mistakes. Punting on 4th and 2 at midfield in a shootout in a game that was already 21-14, you can't do that. You can't do that. That was the difference in the game. Josh Heupel punted. Kirby Smart didn't. Kirby Smart didn't get a 4th down, but he got another one. He got 2 other ones, actually. You got to be aggressive. You got to go for it there. You are facing Georgia. Josh Heupel not punting the ball, or Josh Heupel punting the ball, was a huge problem. I put a ton of the blame on Josh Heupel for that. You cannot punt the ball there. You've got to go for it. And then Josh Heupel getting cute late. He settled for the field goal after a false start when it was 1st and 15, and Tennessee had the ball up 35-30 and less than 5 minutes to go in the 4th quarter. He settled for the field goal, which could have been missed. It was a 48-yard field goal. He got lucky that Max Gilbert made it, which was a big deal. And then, as we know, when they got the ball back, he tried to get cute again, didn't manage things right, and his clock management combined with a couple of mistakes resulted in Tennessee kicking a field goal from the wide hash mark, which they didn't want to do. Crucial mistake. That was all Josh Heupel. Another person who gets some of the blame, and 3 other guys get some of the blame, by the way. 3 other guys. Look, this is going to be hard for a lot of people to say, but Joey Aguilar does have to get some blame. Joey Aguilar did fumble 1 ball on a strip sack. Now he recovered it, but he did fumble 1 ball, and he threw 2 interceptions. You can't throw 2 interceptions and not get any blame for what you've been doing. Joey Aguilar has to get some of the blame for what he did. That's a real big deal. He has to get 5% of the blame for what he did. So Joey Aguilar gets 5% of the blame for those 2 interceptions. He wasn't fully accurate. He missed a couple of times. You love the moxie he played with. You love the way he played in the game. And I'm not going to hate on him for that. But at the same time, there's no way you can look at Joey Aguilar and say that he doesn't deserve some of the blame for what he did in this game. And I think you have to say that Joey Aguilar was a problem. He's going to get 5% of the blame with just those mistakes he made. I mean, again, critical mistakes that he made in that game that just cannot be acceptable when you're facing Georgia. Now, you live with it with Joey Aguilar for other reasons, but you can't just say he doesn't make any mistakes because you live with it. I can't do that. So Joey Aguilar gets 5% of the blame for those 2 picks, even though he was hit on one of them, to be fair. Another 5% goes to the interior offensive line. There was that snap by Sam Pendleton and that false start by Sham Umarov that I talked about, the two of the turning points. Yep, Sam Pendleton's snap, his false start that forced Josh Heupel to settle for a field goal, which Josh Heupel should not have done late, instead of sticking it on their throats when they had the ball up 35-30. That was a crucial false start. And then Shamron Umarov's false start forced Tennessee to kick a longer field goal that they missed that resulted in them losing the game. I can't put a ton of blame on them because they didn't get a lot of chances to pave the way for a good running game, and their rushing attack was still pretty good. And also, Joey Aguilar was clean, and a lot of that does fall on the interior of the offensive line. They deserve credit too. So taking that into account, yeah, I have to say that I think that when you put it all together, you have to give the interior offensive line some blame for what happened there. And finally, 5%, Max Gilbert. Look, Max Gilbert, credit to him. He made a 48-yarder, and he made 2 field goals beyond 40 yards in this game. But the fact of the matter is, with the game on the line, he missed a 42-yarder. It was more difficult than it should have been, and I put it on Josh Heupel. But if you can make a 48-yarder, you can make a 42-yarder. And with the game on the line, when those kicks matter, that's the most important time to make those. And he came up short. So when you take that into account, Max Gilbert has to get 5% of the blame for what happened. He has to. You can't miss those field goals, particularly when, what ended up being the difference in the game, guys? Tennessee was 2 of 3 on field goals in regulation. Georgia was 3 of 3, plus they got a 2-point conversion. There you go. Difference in the game right there. That allowed Georgia to get it to overtime. Peyton Woodring was perfect on his field goals, and Max Gilbert missed a 42-yarder. And by the way, you saw the reports on the sideline of how he was getting ready. He was nervous. There's no way around it. Max Gilbert was very, very nervous when he was kicking that field goal. And not having a clutch gene is something that's going to stand out. And clearly he doesn't have the clutch gene, because it would have been one thing if he missed like a knuckler line drive or something like that, because his 48-yarder was a line drive. But that's not actually what happened. What really happened was he hooked it with the power because he got nervous. And so when you take that into account, Max Gilbert has to get 5% of the blame. So Joey Aguilar, interior offensive line, and Max Gilbert each sharing 5% of the blame. Josh Heupel gets 35% of the blame for some of his in-game management, and the pass defense gets 50% of the blame. Again, playing shorthanded, but they cannot make the mistakes that they made, and they made some horrible mistakes in this game. So pass defense 50%, Josh Heupel 35%, Joey Aguilar 5%, interior offensive line 5%, Max Gilbert 5%. I think that's probably the best way to break this down overall in terms of how to divvy up the blame for the way things went. You can mix and match however you please, but I think it's very, very, very clear that the blame squarely falls mostly on the pass defense, and it then falls on Josh Heupel. Everything else could have been altered, but Josh Heupel and the pass defense was a huge part of what happened in this game. Our Torchbearers. Who were the Torchbearers from Tennessee football's heartbreaking loss to the Georgia Bulldogs? And yes, it was a heartbreaking loss in every way, shape, and form possible. Well, there were quite a few, believe it or not. There were guys who played well up on the line. The edge rushers all played great. The defensive line, by the way, helped Tennessee control the line of scrimmage, and it started from there and with the offensive line. So there's a lot of people to credit. But the first torchbearer in this game is Dominic Bailey. And I almost want to give this as a collaborative between Dominic Bailey, Tyree West, and Bryson Neeson in the middle, who was trying to help with that, even as he was sometimes getting banged up. Tennessee's defensive line was gassed by the end. They were. They are thin with Jackson Moy and David Hobbs out. And they have to rely on their defensive ends who play up on the line in a 4-point stance, which are Dominic Bailey, Tyree West, and Tyree Weathersby. Well, then Bryson Easton had to do a huge bulk of the work in the middle for all of that. With all of that said, Dominic Bailey represented all of them. He had a sack in this game, a big one, and he had 5 tackles for a loss, 5 tackles total, plus a solo tackle and that sack. He did a lot of good for Tennessee in this game, and Bryson Easton and Dominic Bailey together were incredible. This is a unit as a whole that I give credit to for the Joshua Joseph strip sack that happened late, which was a key play. I didn't have Joshua Joseph's, spoiler alert, on this list because while he did have the strip sack that Bryson Easton recovered, Dominic Bailey was more consistent throughout the game at helping to get pressure around the edges on Gunnar Stockton. And so Dominic Bailey is my number 5 torchbearer. He gets a ton of credit. My next torchbearer, Lance Hurd. Now, I've talked to you guys about how the offensive line played. They pleasantly surprised me today with the way the interior played. The interior was great. They did everything right. They did everything you're supposed to do. And it just didn't work out for them in the end because of a couple of mistakes late and then a few other things that happened. But the offensive line as a whole was solid. And there were no issues at tackle whatsoever. And Lance Hurd was the biggest star. Lance Hurd had some impressive blocks throughout the day. He did everything he was supposed to do. He has really taken a step forward for the Vols this season, given the way he played last season at the beginning of the year when he was playing on a sprained ankle. Lance Hurd is easily the best offensive lineman on Tennessee right now. And Lance Hurd may or may not be the best offensive lineman, one of the best offensive linemen in the SEC now. He is an elite left tackle. He has 100% talent to be an All-American caliber left tackle. What he did in this game, Lance Hurd, containing Georgia's secondary, keeping Joey Aguilar upright, that came down to him. Lance Hurd was the best. It's a collaborative. Jesse Perry on the right side at right tackle did a good job. Sam Pendleton and Sham Umarov deserve credit in the middle, but obviously Pendleton and Umarov made key mistakes in this, each of them, which knocks them out. So it will come down to Lance Hurd, Wendell Moe Jr., or Jesse Perry. And Lance Hurd is the guy who does all the best blocking for Tennessee in this one. He was the key left tackle. He's the blindside tackle, and being the blindside tackle was crucial in this game. And it kept Joey Aguilar upright. It allowed Joey Aguilar to make a lot of plays. Lance Hurd, easily a torchbearer, one of the best players in the game. A ton of credit. Back to the defensive side. And here's another collaborative effort. Caleb Herring is the face of the collaborative effort for the edge rushers, who earns a torchbearer award. Dominic Bailey, Bryson Easton, I told you guys, collaborative effort, Tyree West, Tyree Weathersby. In the middle, on the edge on the other side with those guys getting the push, Caleb Herring, Joshua Josephs, and Jordan Ross were all able to make plays. Jordan Ross, Caleb Herring, and Joshua Josephs each had 4 total tackles. Caleb Herring and Joshua Josephs had 3 solo tackles each. Jordan Ross assisted on a sack, had a tackle for a loss, and broke up a pass. Joshua Josephs had a strip sack. But Caleb Herring was the best. He had 1.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for a loss. He was the playmaker of this team among the edge rushers. Now, a lot of what other guys do lead to them being the playmakers. And again, this is why this is a collaborative, but Caleb Herring was the biggest star. And it wasn't just those 2.5 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. He was always getting to Gunnar Stockton around the edge. Always. Caleb Herring was doing everything he could to bring the max amount of pressure to Gunnar Stockton and put him through as much hell as possible. And by and large, it worked most of the time. It, again, part of Gunnar Stockton's mobility that we didn't see, that changed the complexion of the game, a lot of it. But Caleb Herring led a group of edge rushers who did everything they could to get to Gunnar Stockton and make him feel every throw he made. They had to prepare for Gunnar Stockton to get hit at times. And because of that, I think Caleb Herring is a torchbearer. He was the best defensive player for Tennessee in this game. Best defensive player. Best defensive player by far. Caleb Herring did an incredible job. And I think Caleb Herring is easily a torchbearer. Up next, we're going to go to specifically Chris Brazzell II. Now, Chris Brazzell II, for those who don't know, is not the only receiver who was elite in this game. I actually think Mike Matthews was key to this game. I said he would be key at the start. Why? He had 5 catches for 59 yards, but his speed on the outside allowed him to dictate coverage, which allowed everybody else to make plays, including Miles Kitzelman at the tight end with 3 catches for 33 yards. Rodarius Jackson had a 5-yard catch. Braylon Staley obviously gets an honorable mention among the receiver group. 9 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. But you can't ignore Chris Brazzell. 6 catches, 177 yards, 3 touchdowns. Chris Brazzell, over the past 2 weeks, has caught 15 balls for 302 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's right. Chris Brazzell, over the past 2 weeks, has caught 15 balls for 302 yards and 5 touchdowns. Incredible stat line for Chris Brazzell. An incredible game for him overall. He is turning into an elite wide receiver. Part of this because of the way Mike Matthews dictates coverage. You haven't been able to see Tennessee's receivers do this in the past. Chris Brazzell was incredible. He had an amazing catch over the middle at one point for Tennessee to put them up in the first quarter. I mean, everything about the way Chris Brazzell played in this was amazing. I have to give him a torchbearer. I can't really say enough about him, honestly. But again, it was a collaborative effort by the receivers overall. So with that in mind, yes, Chris Brazzell is definitely a torchbearer in this game. He really stands out. But the obvious torchbearer, not going to shock anybody on this one, Joey Aguilar. A true underdog story in this one. Almost had the best underdog story ever as he completed 24 of 36 passes for 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I know it's crazy. Joey Aguilar is on this list in terms of the blame pie for the 2 interceptions, but he's also on this list for how well he played in the moxie he played with. Tennessee needed a quarterback like Joey Aguilar, willing to take risks, willing to let his receivers make plays. He was always willing to do that, and he did that in this one. And being willing to let his receivers make plays is why Tennessee was in position to upset Georgia late. They haven't had a quarterback that willing to do that, honestly, ever under Josh Heupel. Yes, Hendon Hooker was very good at letting his players make plays, but Hendon Hooker, most of the time, those receivers were bare running down the sidelines. Many defenses have shifted to how they play Tennessee. They've run that little shell over the top coverage. And Tennessee needed a quarterback with moxie, willing to let his receivers make plays and trusting them to make plays. Joey Aguilar has done that. And because Joey Aguilar has done that, he is proving that he belongs in this league. And as tough as this was for him, and I'm sure it was, he's shown that he can maybe do enough to help Tennessee long term still get to the college football playoff. So Joey Aguilar, again, is the torchbearer of the game. He was the best player in the game, and he was the star of the game. He is my top torchbearer. Everybody give a round of applause for Joey Aguilar. Hit the like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn on your notifications, tell a friend. We broadcast live every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, and the show is represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win, white settle. Banks & Jones by T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. And that Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, Ted Russell Ford Lincoln, is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. We're going to close the show out with the report card. It's report card time, and I'm going to do this in real time with you guys. So let's get rolling. The Tennessee football report card in their heartbreaking 44-41 overtime loss to Georgia. Quarterbacks get an A-. A- for quarterbacks. Joey Aguilar gets an A- because of the moxie, how tough he played, and everything in between, throwing for 370 yards. He's the player of the game. He did throw 2 interceptions, though. The second one was very clearly his fault. He missed a couple of throws over the middle. One time he tried to be careful. He shouldn't have been careful because I believe he had Braylon Staley late in the game running on a crossing route. So Joey Aguilar played well gets an A-, but 2 interceptions you can't overlook, even with the 4 touchdown passes and 374 yards, particularly when the second interception was as clear as day his fault. Running backs, B+. And maybe it was the flow of the game, but I don't think Tennessee used their running backs as much. Star Thomas had 9 carries for 60 yards. Deshaun Bishop had 15 carries for 54 yards. Peyton Lewis had 5 carries for 19 yards. If you're counting, that is 29 carries for 133 yards, which is a little under 5 yards a carry. I believe, if I'm doing my math right, see 114, 133, 24, 29. Yep, 29 carries for 133 yards. They could have been better, but they were playing Georgia's defensive line, one of the, a Kirby Smart-led defense. What are you going to do? So I give the running backs a B+ overall. And they were good in pass protection, by the way. They were good in pass pro. They didn't catch any balls out of the backfield, but they were good in pass pro. Moving on, the tight ends. Another A-. Miles Kitzelman had 3 catches for 33 yards. That was all they did, but they were also, again, good in pass pro and good in blocking. So tight ends get an A- too. I give them a lot of credit for the way they played. Wide receivers, A+. No way around it. Wide receivers were superb in this game. And I mean, absolutely superb. The wide receivers, Chris Brazzell, as I mentioned, as a torchbearer, had 6 catches for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns. Braylon Staley, though, added 9 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. Mike Matthews added 5 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. Those guys were incredible. They were elite. Radarius Jackson, for good measure, by the way, threw in a 5-yard catch. There is no way around it. The receivers were an A+. There was literally nothing negative I can say about that group. The wide receivers get a huge A+. The offensive line, A-. I talk about the Shamron Umarov and Sam Pendleton penalties late. Those stand out like an Arian Foster fumble in a game. Arian Foster didn't fumble a lot at Tennessee. It's just when he did, they always seem to matter. Those 2 penalties mattered a lot. But outside of that, they ran the ball very well. They only allowed Joey Aguilar to get sacked 1 time, playing against the Georgia defensive line that was that elite. They were very, very, very good. I'll downgrade them to a B+. I'll downgrade them to a B+ because those penalties were just too crucial. You can't make those penalties in that moment. So I'm going to downgrade them to a B+. But overall, the offensive line was very, very, very good, and I give them a lot of credit for what they did. Overall offensive grade is an A. He scored 44 points on a Georgia defense. He had 41 points on a Georgia defense in regulation, despite having 2 turnovers. Overall offensive grade, easy A. I don't have to think about it. On the defensive side, defensive line gets a B+. Now, it was an A- until the final couple of drives. They were tired. The lack of depth showed. If Jackson Moy and David Hobbs, by the way, play this game, there's a chance Tennessee wins because they were just too tired in the end on the defensive line. And you saw that Georgia just ran it down their throats in overtime, and that's what pushes them to a B+. But they were outmatched, and they were tired. And up until that point, they played very, very, very well. Defensive line still gets a B+. I don't hold it against them for not getting into the A range. It's just that they got tired in the end. Edge rushers get an A+. A+. Caleb Herring, Joshua Josephs, Jordan Ross, these edge rushers get an A+. They were incredible. Combining Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross for 2 sacks, 3.5 tackles for a loss, with 4.5 when you add Joshua Josephs, and a pass deflection in Joshua Josephs with the strip sack. The edge rushers easily get an A+. Okay, so moving on. I got to go to the back end. The linebackers, C-. They stopped the run well, but they let Gunnar Stockton with his mobility torch them at times, and they could have easily contained things better. And Gunnar Stockton made plays over the middle. They allowed way too many of those to happen. Arian Carter did lead the team in tackles with 13 total and had 3 solo, but he made way too many mistakes in this game. I can't get past it. Arian Carter in coverage has shown too many issues, and he's got to improve. And Jeremiah Thielander was the same way with 7 total tackles, 2 of which were solo. They both were just, again, in coverage, they were bad. I can't get past it. They were bad in coverage. It was a problem all night. And because of that, I'm giving Arian Carter and the linebacker unit a C-. There's a reason Gunnar Stockton made so many plays. Secondary, D. Lucky it's not an F. Way too many pass interference penalties on the day. Far too many pass interference penalties on the day. Now, again, secondary, to their defense, was playing without Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III. Not having those two guys was going to be a problem long term. But at the same time, they still could have done better than they did. I want to get to Michael Palmer, who had a great point earlier with the secondary. Safeties are a liability. Redmond got picked on and did not get support over the top. I agree. I've actually been very critical of the safeties all year. I don't think they're that good. I think Tennessee should be. I don't know why Jordan Thomas is not starting. He hasn't hit the transfer portal, and they lost Jacoby Thomas in the offseason. That was a big deal. But Andre Turntine was never that good. He has not been that good since he was at Tennessee. He's an experienced player, but he's not that athletic. He's just not. And Idris Farouk is just not good. And I agree. There was no safety help. You can talk about Jermon McCoy and Ricky Gibson III being out, but you should still be able to provide safety help over the top. Jermon McCoy being in there should help you be more elite, honestly. Now we're seeing last year, Jermon McCoy was just covering for safeties, particularly Andre Turntine, because he was able to lock down one side of the field. Colton Hood, solid cornerback. Jalen McMurray, solid cornerback. Boo Carter, still good in the star position. And Ty Redmond developing. You got to love the way he plays, but Ty Redmond made too many mistakes. He's a true freshman. He's going to get better. But Colton Hood is not a guy. You can't play Hood Island the way you can McCoy Island, and that showed in this game. And then the overall defensive grade is C. They gave 44 points, 38 in regulation. So, yeah, overall defensive grade is a C. By the way, correction, when I said offensive 41 points, they scored 38 points in regulation, but still gave 38 points. Defensive grade is a C. They let Gunnar Stockton play too well. Now, place kicking. Guys, I was ready to write out A+ for place kicking. Max Gilbert had nailed a 48-yarder. And by the way, he also nailed a field goal beyond 40 yards in overtime. He had 2 40-yarders in the game, perfect on extra points. All but one of Josh Turbeville's kicks went for a touchback. But then comes the game-winning kick that you're supposed to make. It's your moment to be famous as a kicker, and Max Gilbert hooks it. That pushes his grade to a B-. It's still above average because you hit 2 40-yarders, including 48-yarder, and Josh Turbeville kicks a bunch of kickoffs for a touchback. But you missed that 42-yarder, your grade is pushed down to a B-. Sorry, that's just the way it goes for field goal kicking. Punting, on the other hand, A-. Jackson Ross had 2 punts that pinned Georgia inside the 12-yard line or closer. One was a 57-yarder and pinned him right on the 4-yard line, but he also only had a 5-yarder at one point that pinned Georgia, not at midfield, but reasonably close. That's what pushes his grade down to an A-. But overall, Jackson was still fine. Return game, it's enough. Actually, no, it's a D. It's a D because they didn't actually lose the return, but Boo Carter fumbled his 1 punt return. There were no kickoff returns. Fumbled his 1 punt return. It wasn't that big of a deal, but Boo Carter fumbled his 1 punt return, and that's enough to say that return game is a D. And the overall special teams grade is a B because the place kicking was the most important of the 3, and that B- outweighs everything else. So we give them a B, 1-letter grade up, but that's because of the punting. And the return game, it doesn't bring it down because it was mediocre. So return game gets a B. All right, now offensive play calling. Okay, I'm going to get to Josh Heupel and his decisions to settle late. I don't consider that offensive play calling. I consider that head coach strategy. Actual offensive play calling when they had to move the ball was perfect. It was an A+. There was no problem with the offensive play calling. I'm going to get to them settling for that 38-yard field goal or the 48-yard field goal late where they ran it 3 times. That's not offensive play calling. That's a strategy to settle for a field goal. But actual play calling, it's an A+. All right, now here's my really hot take. You guys are going to think I'm crazy on this, and I'm going to go ahead and go to this. There is a ton of criticism of Tim Banks tonight, and we need to back off of that. Everybody needs to back off criticizing him. Tim Banks was coaching this game. Let me just remind you guys what he was dealing with. 2 of his top 3 defensive tackles were out of this game against a top 5 team, one of the most talented teams in the country. His top 2 quarterbacks were out against one of the top 5 teams in the country. I don't know where you guys think that Tim Banks, without his top 2 cornerbacks and without his top 2 defensive tackles, was going to all of a sudden show out and put together a master performance. I'm sorry. Tim Banks gets an A- for his defensive play calling. He brought pressure when he needed to. He made sure his guys got pressure around the edges. He's got linebackers who struggled in coverage, safeties who were committing far too many penalties. Tim Banks was playing and coaching massively shorthanded tonight. The play of the defense was the problem, but the play of the defense comes down to the fact that a lot of these guys shouldn't be starting right now because the guys who should be are hurt. 4 starters are hurt on defense, guys. 4. That's a really big deal. I don't know where you guys think that Tim Banks was supposed to call some epic game with that. He gets an A-. He gets an A-, and I know people are going to criticize me for that, but he gets an A-, and I think the actual play calling, when it mattered, was superb. The play calling was superb throughout. The issue, and this is my last take, was the head coaching in game decisions. Michael, you asked a great question with Tim Banks. Why is there not safety help to help the freshman corner? A couple of reasons. I think one, Tim Banks was worried more times about Gunnar Stockton over the middle of the field. But 2, I think the safeties are just not athletic and not that good. They get caught out of position all the time. And you pointed out they are limited at safety. They're severely limited, and it's a problem. So I'm just going to say that, look, Tim Banks, I got no problem with the way he called the game. I'm only giving him an A- just because he had 38 points. I could have given him an A+. I got no issue with the way Tim Banks coached this game. There were way more issues with the defense beyond Tim Banks. Overall head coaching grade is a C, though. Even though the play calling is in the A range, the head coaching grade is a C. Josh Heupel made too many mistakes. Punting forward on 4th and 2 in a shootout in the first half, huge mistake. You were 4th and 2 near midfield. You got to go for that. Second half, settling for the field goal, a 48-yarder, which you hit to get a 38-30 lead, though, when you need to put your foot on the throats of Georgia, when you have the ball up 35-30 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, you got to go for the jugular. Not doing that, crucial mistake. It's Georgia. It's Kirby Smart. They will come back. And then trying to get cute on the final drive of regulation that results in a 42-yard field goal from the left hash mark where it didn't have to be that way. Those in-game decisions are critical, and it pushes Josh Heupel's grade down to a C. So that is my report card. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in today. Again, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. Why settle? Banks & Jones, T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. We broadcast live to you every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio. Ted Russell Ford Lincoln is your home for the finest vehicles in Knoxville, new and used, East Tennessee's largest Ford and Lincoln volume dealer. Hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell, turn on your notifications, tell a friend. We are still building something great here at Off the Hook Sports. Want you to be a part of it. We will be back on Monday to talk more of Tennessee football's heartbreaking loss to Georgia, and we'll look ahead to the rest of the week. You guys have a great rest of your weekend with Caleb Calhoun. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Crucial recap, tough loss. Go have fun tonight. Go have fun tomorrow. Keep things in perspective. It is football, and sometimes you live for games like this, and sometimes they hurt, but that makes them so much more fun when you get the wins that you want, and they will come. Have a great night, everybody. I will see you guys Monday with Caleb Calhoun. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook.